3 years ago, I gave up my apartment, sold most of my belongings, stored some in the boot of a friend's car, and started calling the road home. Everyone thought I was crazy. A 25-year-old girl from a regular middle-class family in the small town of Dehradun? What do you mean she was going to live like a gypsy? Well, this is what I mean. Like every good student, I worked pretty hard while growing up. I studied science in the 12th grade, even though I didn't really like it. I did a bachelor's degree in economics, even though I didn't really care for it. After I graduated, I scored a good job and worked for 2 years, even though I hated the 9-to-5 lifestyle. Can you raise your hands if any of this sounds familiar? Exactly. So by the time I was 23, I felt like even though I was on the right path, I was leading such an average life, a life that didn't excite or inspire me. And the sad truth is, so many of us are going to spend our entire lives feeling that way. So I started asking myself, what is it that inspires me? What can I change? I decided to take some time off work and look for answers. And I landed up here, in the cold mountain desert of Spiti, in the high Trans-Himalayas of India. For the first time in my life, I slept under the Milky Way and a million stars. I hitchhiked alone through some of the remotest villages of India, something I could have never imagined doing. I slept in monasteries, and I met nuns who had been meditating in mountain caves for decades. On an exceptionally dark night, I traced the entire journey of a lunar eclipse as shooting stars fell through. I think it was the first time in my life that I really felt alive. It was like I had been climbing this ladder my entire life, the one that society expects us to, the one that our parents want us to focus on, the one that's considered normal. But suddenly, I saw all these other paths and branches, and I realized it would be really stupid to not jump off the ladder and experiment with these paths. So in 2011, at age 23, I decided to quit my job as a social media strategist in Singapore and create my own definition of what normal is. Everyone thought I was crazy. I was giving up a steady, high-paying job and a good standard of living for a rather uncertain future. But I had some savings, and I started freelancing, and everything I earned, I spent it on traveling, because it was being on the road that seemed to inspire and excite me. Was I the only crazy one? Turns out no. While traveling solo in Mauritius, I met a fisherman called Ravi. The evening we met, Ravi was wearing a torn sweater. He had no slippers on his feet. He lived in a rundown shack down the road from a fancy beach resort. Ravi told me he had been offered a job in a factory where many of his friends worked long hours and earned big money. But Ravi didn't take the job. Everyone thought he was crazy. They seemed deeply unhappy, Ravi told me about his friends. Sure, they have nice houses, nice clothes. Some of them can even afford an international holiday, and Ravi can't. But he loves the sea. And as a fisherman, he gets to be at sea every single day. He's out rowing his boat on the waves. He's out snorkeling to marvel at the underwater life. His days are marked with unforgettable sunrises, like this one, and sunsets. Sometimes he rows out so far at sea that it's just him and the horizon. Ravi chooses to live a simple life, yet one that inspires and excites him every single day. As for me, I've been living without a home for 3 years now. I stay in a place for a few weeks and then move on to another place. One day, I'm waking up in the shadow of an active volcano in Guatemala. Another day, I'm cycling along the Caucasus Mountains of Georgia all the way to the border of Russia. When people ask my mom what I do for a living, she tells them, इसे घूमने का शौक है, which is kind of true. But I make my living through a career or through a profession that didn't exist while I was studying science in school or studying economics in college. That profession is travel blogging. I can't always be sure how much money I'm going to make in a month or a year, but I like to think of it as a financial adventure. And I've met so many people on my travels who make their living through their passions. So these are people who make their living from translating languages, studying yoga, running marathons, even studying snakes. A lot of the times, I end up feeling this way. And that's okay. There's something I learned early on in my journey, which is that I don't have to do what everyone else is doing. It actually happened on my first Euro trip. So I was traveling with a friend, and our first destination was France. I was really excited to land in Paris and see the Eiffel Tower. Maybe feel all poetic in the most romantic city in the world. That is the stuff of bucket lists, right? I have to admit, the Eiffel Tower kind of ruined Paris for me. It was just surrounded by scores of tourists taking pictures of themselves with the tower. And there were scores of people harassing us to buy I Love Paris souvenirs. We walked a long way to reach the tower, and when we got there, I was looking at the scene and I was thinking, is this it? And in those moments, I realized that following the crowds is really not my idea of travel. And as someone who's on the road, I can define what works for me. So I started seeking out lesser-known destinations that are away from the tourist circuit, where I can connect with locals and really experience what their life is like. So a few months ago, I decided to travel to Italy, but skip Rome, Venice, and Milan. Everyone thought I was crazy. But I lived with an Italian artist in a small little village in Umbria. He lent me his brother's bicycle to explore parts of the countryside that only the locals ever go to. And on a Sunday, he invited me for a traditional Italian brunch in the home of one of his buddies, which was a 500-year-old stone mansion perched on top of a hill. There, in an ancient stone oven, we baked traditional Italian pizzas. Everyone sat around in the garden to have the brunch. I tasted some of the finest Italian coffee I've ever tried. And then, much to my surprise, everyone laid down in the garden, one by one, for a communal afternoon siesta. I think it was the closest I could ever get to the dreamy Italian way of life. But this realization that I had in travel, that I don't have to do what everyone else is doing, it applies to life as well. So coming back to feeling this way, I'm 28 now, and my Facebook newsfeed is always buzzing with updates of people from school and college getting married, having kids, buying a new house, getting a new promotion. I can tell you it's a lot of peer pressure. But I have to keep reminding myself that we take life too seriously. So what if I don't have a fancy job by the time I'm 26, or a promotion by the time I'm 28, or a husband or wife by the time I'm 30, or kids or a home by the time I'm 32? It's okay to mess up and live a little. In fact, the more I travel, the more I realize that we don't have to keep climbing that ladder that society expects us to if we don't want to. We have to change the way we see life and really experiment and find our own unique paths that inspire us, even if everyone else thinks it's crazy. Thank you.